Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cologne. I would like to start and warm you a bit up for today's and tomorrow's session with an update on Part 21 rulemaking. I would like to show you what regulatory changes have occurred in the past 12 months since we met last time in this forum, and also give you a brief overview of the ongoing Part 21 rulemaking activities. There was, for the first time since 2016, a change to Part 21. Part 21 has been adopted. The Commission adopted this amendment in March, and it was published in the official journal in June, and also entered into force in June of this year. This amendment covers three topics that we handled in three different rulemaking activities. The one that we also extensively discussed during the past year's DOA and third workshop here was the topic of level of involvement. So in this amendment, which is in Regulation 2019-897, you now finally see the changes in Part 21, which addresses the topic of level of involvement and also the other topics that we handled under this rulemaking activity, which were, for example, the possibility for organizations, for approved organizations, to get an additional privilege for major changes, major repairs, and STCs. So this is the completion of a very important rulemaking activity for the agency. There were two other rulemaking activities which also completed its life cycle in this amendment. There's a change to the environmental rules, Rulemaking Class 513 and 514, the CAPE 10 Committee on the Aviation Environmental Protection of ICAO, implementation of the recent ICAO Annex 16 changes into, in this time, Part 21. The basic regulation had already been amended in that respect. And there's a small change which came out of a rulemaking task mainly addressing operational and continuing airworthiness topics on maintenance check flights. And while clarifying the topic of maintenance check flights in the ops and continuing airworthiness rules, there was also a need to introduce in Part 21 one additional purpose for a permit to fly for maintenance check flights. So you will see an additional sentence, a purpose number 16, in 21A701. So these changes you will find now since June in Part 21. There is a small amendment upcoming, which you will see in a couple of weeks in the official journal, Amendment to Part 21, which will align with the recent amendment of the Continuing Airworthiness Regulation, Regulation 1321/2014. This Continuing Airworthiness Regulation was amended last year with Regulation 2018-11-1309, based on two opinions issued by the agency in 2016 and 2018, introducing in Part M proportionate rules, which is handled under the topic Part M Light, introducing safety management requirements, which is under the topic of SMS requirements in Part M, which then is handled under the discussion, Part KAO, Part KAMO, reorganization of this continuing airworthiness regulation. As we do refer in Part 21 to a number of provisions in this continuing airworthiness regulation in Part M, we also needed to adapt these alignments. So you will not see any change in contents, but we realign with the new structure of the continuing airworthiness regulation. And in the same regulation, we'll see the correction of some mistakes and one clarification to the regulation 2019-897 that we found after the regulation was amended. So this is a quite important development this year. In relation to the AMC guidance material supporting the application of Part 21, there were two amendments this year. Beginning of the year, we issued Issue 2 Amendment 8 of the AMC guidance material, which introduced proportionate AMCs for production and design organizations at the lower end of general aviation. The rulemaking task number for that one was 689, Part 21, proportionality. And in September, we issued Amendment 9, which provides the AMC and guidance material in relation to the changes that were introduced by Regulation 897. So the AMC guidance material related to level of involvement, the privilege, the environmental requirements, and the maintenance check flights. So please familiarize yourself with these changes. One important point that I would like to mention to you is the applicability of these new rules. As I mentioned, they entered into force in June, exactly on the 23rd of June 2019, and the applicability of these provisions was split in the regulation. Most of the changes will only become applicable next year, on the 23rd of March 2020. In particular, those one related to level of involvement, also the new possibility for permit to fly. There is a transition period of 9 months in the regulation. But 2 topics already became applicable immediately with the entry into force, meaning already today you have to apply them or you can apply them. The environmental rules, Cape 10 related, are already applicable, and also all the changes that we introduced in 21A263, so the privilege to approved design organizations, are already applicable. So you already today have the possibility, for example, to apply for an extension of your scope, so apply for a change to the terms of approval of your DOA in order to get, for example, a privilege for major changes. We discussed a lot of these changes, especially those ones related to level of involvement, last year and the year before in this forum. For those of you who are less familiar with the changes, and for those of you who want to refresh their memory about these changes, we have put some efforts in updating the information on our website, not only on level of involvement, but also on all the other changes that you will find now in Part 21. The topic is handled as a news item on our website. You see the topic, the title of it is level of involvement, but actually you'll find all the information related to this Part 21 change. So also the environmental ones, the permit to fly issue, the privilege, you all find the information related to these changes on our website. What we tried here is to compile as much as possible useful information that can help you to understand the purpose, the reasoning for these rulemaking changes. Also ideas on how you could apply these changes. We've put presentation slides. We put some videos of training, of presentations that we provided. For example, the session of 2 years ago, when we extensively discussed level of involvement, had been recorded, and you'll find now some extract of that on the website. So you can watch that if you want to familiarize yourselves with these changes. In addition, we organized in the second half of this year 4 workshops, 4 information sessions for you, for the industry, on all the changes that are now in Regulation 897. You see here the events when they took place, and also the statistics of your participation. So you see that almost 200 organizations, almost 200 design organizations, production organizations participated in these sessions. We had 367 participants. We still have provisionally 1 event in our plan that, provided there's sufficient interest, we may organize 1 further event. But we also recorded one of these sessions, the one in Cologne, and we are currently finalizing the director's cut of this recording, and in a couple of days you also find the videos from this training session on the website. So you can also find that training online and you can access it. In addition, based on the questions we received during these information sessions, We are working on a set of frequently asked questions where we see that it needs a bit further explanation on how the rules can be applied, some practical tips and tricks. And we are working on this, and we will also provide an FAQ section on the website with the question that we hear most in relation to the application of these rule change. So please use these possibilities and don't hesitate to approach us if you have questions, if something is unclear. We will try to respond to you on any of that. So now looking into the future, what is still ongoing in respect of Part 21? And before giving you some detailed or more brief introduction of the still ongoing Part 21 rulemaking task, I would like to give you an idea of what my objectives with Part 21 are. What do we need to change in Part 21 urgently in the coming years? It's not that we want to constantly change Part 21, but I would like to give you an idea of the three most important topics for me that we need to address in Part 21. The first one, and we will also discuss this in a bit more detail today, is to implement the changes that have been introduced in the basic regulation in September last year. There are changes in the basic regulation in our main rule that gives the tasks to the agency in the substantive requirements for airworthiness and environmental protection, where we need to adapt and align Part 21. So one important topic for us is to implement these changes. The second important topic is related to proportionality. We need to revisit Part 21 in order to reflect that not all organizations are the same. Not all aircraft are the same. We have higher risks aircraft, we have lower risk aircraft, we have commercial aircraft which are used in commercial transportation, we have leisure or sports aircraft, and the rules are not necessarily scalable to these different organizations and users. So especially when we are looking at GA, you know that we have a GA roadmap now in the second phase. We need to address in Part 21, especially for GA, more proportionate rules, more scalable rules addressed to this audience. That is the second important topic for us. And the third important topic is related to safety management system. So we need to increase the level of safety by introducing, for approved organizations, a more proactive system to manage safety risks. So safety management systems. So three big topics. I would like to give you an idea on how to best remember that. The three letters PSI, there are some terms behind that, but if we twist a little bit, tweak a little bit the letter S, put it a bit in a different shape, and considering that we're talking about safety management system, so we have 2 times an S in there, we put a bit of magic powder on it, then we come to a 2, and it looks something like Part 21. So if you take one thing from my presentation, the purpose why we are working on Part 21, if you remember proportionality, safety management system, and implementation of the new requirements from the basic regulation, I would be very, very happy. So what actually are these tasks behind the 3 objectives? 2 topics, 2 of these objectives we want to address with the implementation of the new basic regulation, Rulemaking Class 727. From the number you see, it's quite a recent one. We want to address proportionality because one important topic in the new basic regulation is to bring in more proportionality in all of our regulations. And for Part 21, this means especially for GA, especially for sports and recreational aircraft. But the basic regulation has much more changes than just the GA proportionality idea, and we cover all of this under this rulemaking task. It's quite a huge one, and we will run it in different phases. For the GA proportionality bit, we are already quite advanced. The red arrow that you see here in the process, we are already in the middle of the consultation. We are organizing workshops to discuss first ideas, first concepts with the affected industry. For other aspects of the regulation of this rulemaking task, we are still in the conceptual phase, and we will come up with public consultations later. We will give you much more insight in this rulemaking task right after my Part 21 presentation. The second one, also addressing proportionality issue, is the possibility to allow the installation of parts without them being manufactured, produced by an approved production organization and consequently issued with a Form 1. This is Rulemaking Task 0018, where we had consulted back in 2017 our proposal in a notice of proposed amendment. We received a lot of comments on this proposal, especially because we proposed 4 criticality levels, and then related to the criticality levels, whether or not a Form 1 would be required. We have reconsidered that concept. We're going back to a yes or no decision, Form 1 yes or no, to only a binary system. This proposal is being discussed with the advisory bodies, and we are shortly before publishing the opinion. And we will combine this opinion to the European Commission with another rulemaking task, the one on instructions for continued airworthiness, Rulemaking Task 252. The next one that is important is the rulemaking task on introducing safety management systems in Part 21, so for production and design organizations, implementing ICAO Annex 19, SARPs, Standard and Recommended Practice, into Part 21. Here we had consulted our first proposal, the Notice of Proposed Amendment, earlier this year. The consultation period by now is closed. We received for Part 21 something like 800, 900 comments. We are currently reviewing them. We are focusing on the changes to Part 21, and in a second stage also on the comments to the AMC guidance material that we proposed. Actually, most of the comments are probably in relation to the AMC and guidance material. So we are carefully reviewing the comments currently. So we are in the beginning of the comment review period, and the opinion currently is planned for Q2. Probably in the EPAS 2020 you will see Q3 is probably a bit more realistic in the third quarter of next year. This is the rulemaking task that I mentioned when I was talking about for parts without Form 1, instructions for continued airworthiness. Here we want to put more clarity in Part 21 on what ICA's, instructions for continued airworthiness, are and how they are used by the people who need to use them. We had split the task in 2 phases. The first phase is already concluded since 2017. The important bit, the definition and contents of ICA, is in its final phase. So we are shortly before publishing the opinion to the European Commission. Not in relation to the rule, to the regulation Part 21, we have a standing rulemaking task, what we call regular update to the AMC and guidance material, where from time to time we address non-controversial, non-complex and mature topics. Over the past years, we had collected quite a number of proposals internally, but also from your side. You had proposed to us possibilities for clarification, for simplification of the AMC and guidance material. We are currently looking at all the proposals that we have received in relation to subpart J, so design organizational topics. And for these ones, we will publish in a couple of weeks. We just finalize the text proposal. In a couple of weeks, you will see a notice of proposed amendment, what we propose to change in the AMCN guidance material. I would already like to mention that we have much more proposals in our inventory, and a lot of proposals in relation to POA issues, production organization, and these ones will come in the next cycle of this regular update task, probably in 2021. And then, just to complete the picture, because we discussed this quite a number of times in the previous years here, the rulemaking task on embodiment of level of involvement in Part 21 has been completed. This was the core task that led to the amendment of the Part 21 regulation that I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation. So to conclude and to give you a bit of an idea of where are we in the process with these different rulemaking tasks where we want to introduce proportionality, implement the new basic regulation and safety management system. This is a rough sketch of our rulemaking process, and currently there are no opinions, EASA opinions pending for adoption. So I don't expect that there will be further changes to Part 21 next year, beginning 2021. The rulemaking activities that have progressed furthest are the two on parts without Form 1 and instructions for continued airworthiness, where we will shortly issue the opinion. So this is the change in Part 21 that you will see next. The rulemaking task on SMS, we recently closed the consultation of our initial proposal. The rulemaking task implementing the new basic regulation, especially the bit on proportionality, GA proportionality, is already in the middle of the consultation. We plan to issue an opinion by the end of next year. For the other aspects, implementing the new basic regulation, we are still in the conceptual phase, so you will see an NPA throughout next year. And then the regular update to AMCN guidance material on the DOA issues, we are shortly before issuing the NPA, so we are at a quite early stage in the process. On this chart, this rulemaking task is the only one where we don't need the two right-hand boxes. This will not go to the Commission. This will conclude with a decision of the agency. All other tasks that you see here on the slide will go the full process until adoption by the European Commission. So thank you very much. I hope I could give you an interesting overview of the ongoing Part 21 activities. Do you have any questions?
Michael, there are a number of questions via Slido, and can we please switch the monitor to show the Slido questions? I don't know whether you can answer most of them, yes. But the easy access rules, yes. The update, for example.
That is quite an important one. Today, you don't find a consolidated version of Part 21. That's definitely an issue. We are working on two streams on that one. The easy access rules, we are currently working on an update. So you should see that probably beginning of next year. And in addition, the Commission also works on an unofficial consolidated version of Part 21 that you will find in the same folder, in the same remit as you'll find the official journal. And this unofficial consolidation by the Commission will be published with the entry into force, with the applicability of the regulation, so in March. You can also find there then the consolidated version.
Just some of the questions, like how many DOAs have applied for it and what will happen when DOA organizations didn't finish. That will be part of my presentation with the DOA update, so we will park them and come back to them a little later.
Okay.
But I think there are plenty of them for you still.
Yeah. So could you clarify the need for Part 21 change related to SMS in Part M? No, I can't. Sorry, Jill. I was not involved in that activity. The current rulemaking activity, I mentioned the change in Part 21, but what we are working in parallel is the SMS for 145, which is not yet there. But for SMS, the regulation 2018, I have to see the number, what you saw, 1137, I think it was, the update of the Part M rules, that is now on the rules. But the idea of safety management systems throughout all the agency rules is to apply the same principles. So if you happen to be familiar with the SMS requirements in the OPS rules, if you are familiar already with the changes in Part M, the changes in 145 and 21 will not be a surprise to you. We try to use the same principle. We are all implementing ICAO Annex 19. We want to build a consistent system within the agency rules, and also the AMC and guidance material are based on the same ideas and then just adapted to the domains where we are working in. There is a question on Switzerland, also a good one. So is there a forecast visible for the adoption of the new Part 21 amendment by Switzerland? So it's for Switzerland, on the one hand side, the treaty between the European Union and Switzerland needs to be adapted to include also the basic regulation and now Part 21. So for every regulation, this treaty needs to be amended. And the same idea also for the EEA states, so for Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. Also, the EEA treaty has to be amended so that Part 21 is also applicable in these four states, Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, and Liechtenstein. For the, now I have to see that I don't mix it up. For one of the two treaties, I've heard that it's in progress. I think it was for the EEA states. For the other treaty, I haven't heard any news. But be aware that if your organization is based in one of these four countries, you today still work under the old basic regulation, 216/2008, and Part 21 status before the amendment, Regulation 897. Only when these treaties have been amended, these regulations have been included, you are back on the same regulations. How do we register interest for the Derby info session? That is the info session that you'll still find on our website that we may conduct next year. So if you're interested, please send me an email, send an email to EASA, and we are currently keeping a list of people who were on the waiting list of one of the four events, which were, except one, all sold out. And for people who are still interested. So if you are interested, please let us know. We are maintaining the list. Why is the action area of Rulemaking Class 252 stated as manufacturers? That is an issue with our EPAS. So there are two issues. We're trying not to use the term manufacturers any longer, but specifying design and production. But the EPAS is still structured into different categories, and manufacturers is still one of them. I think in the, if I'm correct, in the EPAS 2020 you will not see that any longer. And also a number of rulemaking tasks are always affecting different action areas. ICA is one that affects continuing airworthiness and design and production organizations. So we always have to take a decision where to put it. And for this one, it was decided to put it in the action area design and production, so manufacturers. Any positive impact on Commission lead time for adoption of revised IRs? Gilles, I assume you're referring to the backlog that existed on a number of rulemaking tasks where the EASA had produced opinions to the European Commission, but it took a couple of months, up to years, until they were adopted. This backlog is almost cleared. So I think overall in the for Part 21, there's no pending opinion. We will later talk about Part 26, later today talk about Part 26, so the airworthiness requirements for operations. There we have one pending opinion, but overall, looking at all the EASA opinions in all of the IR domains, we are down to something like 5 or 6 pending opinions. So there's no backlog any longer. How are the EU regulatory changes somehow coordinated with foreign countries to avoid BASA or arrangement of impacts or any known validation activities? Also, very good question. We do have very often and regular exchanges with our bilateral partners, where we update them on ongoing rulemaking activities, where we want to go. It's done on both sides. We learn from Canada, from the US, from Brazil, what the ongoing rulemaking activities are. We discuss whether this may have an impact on the validation of certificates between the countries. So that is a standard activities that we are conducting on all of the rulemaking activities. And then when the CID on ICA rulemaking task will be available, that will be published at the same moment with when we publish the opinion. So you'll find that on the website as well. Can we, sorry, the green one that now disappeared. Can you bring it back, Albert? There was one that disappeared. Yes, that's one. Why is the LOI required for all DOAs, even if they have very low activities? We try to bring in proportionality depending on the activities. So if you're looking at the concept of LOI, if there's limited activities, especially when we're talking only about activities in relation to minor changes, minor repairs, ETSO, there's no need for you to do anything. You don't need to propose the level of involvement to the agency as part of your certification program. This is only the case when we're talking about applications for major changes, major repairs, STCs and TCs. So that's one of the top ideas that we implemented to bring in scalability in the regulation. Is there a clear process to assess the LOI capabilities of an organization? Yes, there is. I need to check. Robert, is that part of your presentation? No. Okay, sorry. Yes, we do have a process for assessing the LOI capabilities. So one of the criteria that is important in order to determine the agency's level of involvement next to complexity, criticality, and novelty is the performance of the organization in the past. And we do collect regular feedback from the PCMs and experts. This feedback is assessed and translated into a risk matrix which is then the basis for us to decide whether the performance of the organization in the past, which gives you an idea of how you may work in future certification projects, if that activity or if this performance was in our categories low, medium or high. We are constantly improving this feedback and also the tool that we have to evaluate this risk matrix. But yes, there's a structured process behind it. So is there an impact on harmonization with the FAA? The same reply as the reply to Dieter Steger. There's a regular coordination with the FAA and all the bilateral partners on the ongoing rulemaking activities. So the question from Gilles Fontaine on the CID on ICA, you can delete. That is responded. So the only one that is open is the one from Martin Russell, but I don't understand the question. Why does the introduction of LOI drive a significant change to the DOA? Is it not just a new process for DOAs? So I'm trying to answer that. If I don't understand your question, Martin, correctly, please let us talk. So there are two different things. We tried to differentiate between level of involvement and, significant change. So you're talking about, yeah. Yes.
Sorry, can you wait until you have a microphone, please?
You get a microphone.
Good morning. Good morning. Martin Russell, Marshall Aerospace. So within the guidance material CT6 DOA policy, with regards to the introduction of LOI, it's indicating that for the introduction of LOI, it drives a significant change to the DOA. And I'm just trying to understand the reasoning behind that.
It's a significant change to your terms of approval. So for LOI, you need to adapt your procedures to introduce the procedures to propose level of involvement if you're working on TCs, STCs, major changes. So that is a significant change to your approval for which you have to apply and which has to be accepted by the agency.
I understand that. For me, it's just a new process to define how we drive our CDI. I'm not seeing it as a particular onerous new process. It's something we can implement with the guidance material available from EASA, but I'm still not understanding why it drives significant change. Surely it's just an additional process. The impact in terms of level of safety is low because obviously on the first application using the new LOI methodology, that will obviously be subject to EASA oversight. So I'm still not really understanding why it drives a significant change.
The LOI is a new concept or refined concept in Part 21. And for the first time, there's a new obligation on organizations to propose a level of involvement. And this is new. We didn't change anything on the rules on subpart J in that respect, but the importance of the change in LOI introducing these new obligations for you that needs to be reflected in your procedure qualifies in terms of subpart J as a significant change to your terms of approval, to your design, your DASA, design assurance system. So this is the reason it falls under the criteria of 247, and therefore you need to apply for a significant change.
Okay, I'm still not really understanding, but thank you.
Okay. We'll try to give you a reply afterwards. No. LOI is very dependent on DOA performance. Can we have greater transparency of the EASA determination? We do give, or we have given in certain fora already an explanation of how we come to the DOA performance. If that is necessary, we can share that in a wider audience. Yeah.
And you will see that also in the DOA presentation and in the CEPIAC presentation. And we will share with industry more and more the way we collect feedback, what is the way we assess industry, so that you have transparency on how you are assessed and how this influences eventually the DOA performance or the level of involvement when it comes to PCM and experts' feedback. So we will share that in the future more and more, and hopefully via CEPIAC in the long term, you should have access to this also. But at the time, for the time being, it's just that this has to be discussed with their responsible counterparts from EASA. Michael, anything on this GA proportionality question at the bottom?
We will come to that in 20 minutes in the next presentation. Are there any more questions than those, if we still have time?
2 more minutes.
When will be there an AMC and guidance material to Part 21 Issue 3 available? We currently don't plan to consolidate the official AMC guidance material. So we are at Issue 2 currently. Issue 2 was created to consolidate all the previous amendments to the AMC and guidance material. Currently, we are focusing on the e-rules tool, where you do get a consolidated version. And you will see in the coming months a different way of us structuring the NPA and also the decisions for AMC and guidance material. We will immediately integrate the AMC guidance material with the rule. So by that, we may not need consolidated versions anymore in the future.
I will take the question on the, do we have to expect changes to LOI caused by experiences of FAA? I think one of the main purpose of LOI was to help us in ensuring that what we are looking at when checking compliance is what is critical and important. And therefore LOI is seen as a way to ensure better oversight of certification activities, and is going in the right direction for Europe. And next to that, we are very closely reviewing all recommendations that are currently being published in the context of the MAX accidents from the various investigations which are ongoing, and We are definitively analyzing all recommendations coming out for potential further improvements to how we do certification activities in our system. For so far, there is nothing that indicates that we have to have a second look at LOI concept.
Michael, maybe one comment on ETSO and ADOAs and how LOI affect them as a last question for this session.
Yes. So for ETSO, LOI applies. We also have to determine our level of involvement as for any other project, but there's a provision in 21B100, point B, you don't have to apply. You don't have to propose level of involvement. So you don't have to make the risk assessment, you don't have to propose your involvement, it will be determined by us.